Hello, hello. This is Biweeklycast. Your host is still here. I'm Dima engineer at Meta.
And I'm Slava, CEO at Savvy LED Solutions.
Today I thought we would talk a bit about strategy and what strategy means. We have an upcoming book review for Bad Strategy, Good Strategy. I have a lot of thoughts about what strategy is, and I thought that probably we can dedicate an episode to talk about that.
Sure, let's go for it.
Yeah, I often find that my views and my thinking about strategy differ from what other people call strategy. So maybe you can keep me honest and check when I describe my thinking about what I call and don't call strategy over here. We usually start with definitions, and I think I like the definitions I found in the definition I found in Wikipedia. I was checking multiple different sources, and what I got it from Wikipedia, where it says that strategy is a general plan to achieve one or more long-term or overall goals under conditions of uncertainty. I think that resonates with me a lot, and I can explain why. But how does this feel to you, like as a definition for strategy?
I feel that it's half of a definition for me. A plan is just one side of the strategy, and I think there is also a choice or a set of choices which is not always illustrated in the plan, like something you have to do before you put together the plan, which is also part of the strategy, which is not described in this definition. So,
right, there would be something that the plan is built on. I agree. Because like when I think about what strategy is and what strategy isn't, I look for certain kind of characteristics in what is being presented as a strategy, and those characteristics are as follows. First, it needs to be a multi-step thing, the kind of a pattern of decision working towards something bigger. It cannot be just a decision. A decision can be strategic, but it has to be part of a bigger view. That's number one. Number two, you're right. It needs to be based on a particular worldview or a model that you develop about how things go and how things develop, and you leverage that to craft your plan to get ahead of competition or whatever it might be in the end. This end needs to be global, and that's point number three. Like we are looking for some sort of a globalish, longer term maximum for the thing that we are trying to optimize. And that means that we sometimes can forego immediate benefits or immediate profits if we are talking about business in order to achieve some longer term, bigger objective or goal. That was number three. Number four, the strategy must be something that does not rely on lucky chance, or it is the luck can help in going with kind of implementation of a strategy or execution of a strategy, but luck itself must not be the key, definitely not the key element of the strategy. So it for example, in business, you should not rely on your competitors making dumb mistakes. You need to assume that they are smart, they're going to do their best, and therefore your strategy need to win on merits, not on someone else making mistakes. And also, when we are talking about about strategy, I'm getting ahead of myself over here. The strategy is only applicable to entities that can have agency in executing a strategy. Like, I don't know, like a child might have a strategy for a vacation, but they lack agency in executing it because the vacation is going to go the way the parents planned the vacation, and we need to be cognizant of that. So those are five characteristics. Multi-step longer-term plan regarding model or worldview, aiming at a global longer-term perspective, doesn't rely on luck, and then whoever lays out the strategy has ability to execute it. What do you think?
That makes a lot of sense. I think the multi-step thing is a bit vague. I mean, pretty much any plan has stages, and how many stages is enough to make it multi-step or a pattern of decisions rather than a single decision?
Right. This is typical problem with definitions. It feels to me like you try to make something specific, but then risk to being overly specific. What I think the pattern of decisions might be a better choice. It's like you do something in order to achieve something, and then on top of that, you achieve something else, which is not possible to achieve from the get-go, sort of a thing.
Is it more like scenario planning when you think about the stages as they will be developing and what choices you'll have to make, like a tree when you think about the opportunities and chances? Or it's more like a roadmap when you think like we do this, then we do that, and we do that, and that's it?
I think it's something in between. I think like the word stage would be more appropriate rather than the word step I use here. Yeah, indeed, like stages, we build up to something, and then from there we build up to something else, rather than just direct execution, or we do X, then Y, then Z.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I think that in number 4, I kind of think that most people still hope for luck and hope for favorable conditions when they do optimistic planning. And overall, I probably haven't seen anything. I've seen cases when people ignore external factors and competitors completely, and they like just don't count on them. But when thinking that they will do something favorably seems a bit weird. I mean, I haven't faced it ever, so it's hard to.
Right. And that's a good point. Maybe that example was ever so slightly exaggerated. I don't think realistically anyone would put in a strategy the competitors making dumb mistakes. I think maybe an example of that could be that if you look at a strategic plan or whatever it might be, where it says, which goes something along the lines, we put something on the market and then customers start buying it. Like that customers start buying it is the kind of wishful thinking. Like we rely on the customers. All of a sudden they start buying it. Like, no, I'd rather see explanation for why there would be forces or conditions such that customers would start buying your product instead of not buying or buying competitors' products or something along those lines.
Yep, that makes sense.
And also here I have to ask you, I know you do a lot of work on strategy and helping people build strategy, run strategic sessions and stuff like that. How does what you observe in those sessions kind of relate to maybe those like 5 criteria that I outlined now?
Generally, it makes a lot of sense. I mostly work with strategists on the level of organization, like the company strategy, not the team or department or specific product. That's why I have quite a narrow understanding of what it means. And I think what I probably would add here is some kind of end state or final goal, because according to Kiev Mohyla Business School, the strategy is just the way to fulfill your mission and vision. According to Roger Martin, it's a set of choices that increase the likelihood of success of the organization. And I think that in your 5 steps, it's kind of very right mechanics, but it kind of forgets why you're making all these choices, and it doesn't have even the Sun Tzu definition is strategy is the art of making use of the best advantages in order to attain victory. Like they still keep in their definitions like why we do these kind of things, because if you get lost in the technicalities and you think like how it should operate, what are the requirements and the characteristics, you kind of forget why you're doing all this activity at the first place.
This is a great point. Like we definitely should not forget the why of the strategy, and maybe me ordering my items in a particular way and putting aims at global maximum like as number 3, it probably should be number 1. You should understand towards what you are building it. Like, yeah, totally agreed. Okay. Cool. You already mentioned Roger Martin, and there's his book Playing to Win, where he defines a strategy as a set of choices that increase the likelihood of success. Like I already get it that it resonates, like this definition sort of resonates with you. Initially, when I just saw this definition, I was like, what set of choices increase likelihood of success? But then I dug deeper, and it turned out like, there is a framework that Roger with his co-author puts forward, which is called strategy choice cascade. And then those choices kind of start making sense, because they line up into choosing like what it is that how we are going to win. Like what do we call it? Win, where we play, how we will win, how we play to win, what are the capabilities required to achieve that, and what's the management system we need to have to support all of that. I think non-controversial definition, judging by your reaction, but I also think that this is relatively specific to business strategy, right? If you are looking at a company level, this is what you would expect. But also I see and hear a lot like word strategy, like many other words, being used in a lot of different contexts, and in those different contexts, it would have ever so slightly different meaning, and definitely would have different specifics and maybe different specific recommendations that come out of the developing those strategy. Like business strategy is something different from, let's say, product strategy and the way how you approach this. Does that ring a bell with you? Have you seen kind of strategy being misused or maybe put in an improper context or something like that?
I wouldn't say it was misused or put in the improper context. It's just different from what I use. That's why the terminology may vary. But whenever I hear people saying something like strategic HR or strategic communications, I normally ask myself, what's strategic about it? Like, is it actually strategic? Especially living in Ukraine in 2025. Everybody claims that this city has strategic value. Like, do we understand the strategic means something that can bring victory to Ukraine, or we can lose the war because of it? And none of the cities that is being under attack right now is of strategic value. It will be very important, but it's not going to lose us the war. And the same thing about communications or HR or something else. Most of those choices that people make at that level, most of those plans and decisions are not decisive enough to have the impact for the entire organization. And what these people probably try saying is that it's business related, it's bringing value, that's something that impacts a lot. But is it strategic? Like, I personally don't think so. And since it's already a buzzword, I think it's kind of a waste to change people's mind and tell them that no, that's not a strategy. Let them use it, but just ask for the definition. What do you mean? And usually in the definition, they say, well, that's something that we can explain to stakeholders. That's something that C-level understands. That's something that helps business.
I agree. Strategic this or strategic that, like strategic ride on the tube. It can be, but probably it isn't. It makes a lot of sense. And I think like one example I would have is I also deal quite a lot with product strategies as opposed, like I deal less with business strategy at this point, but it's more like product strategy. Things there with product strategy is one of the important considerations you would have is like, right, where you direct your product, like who is the target audience, and with that, like what are the problems that you want to solve with your product for your customers. And depending on that choice, it positions your product. And if you, I don't want to say guess right, because it's not necessarily a guess, you develop a model behind or kind of a view behind what's going to be important in the future and so on and so forth. And based on that, you can achieve great success because if you start building on something earlier than, let's say, your competitors, you will be ahead of them by the time it becomes important. But even though that thing would be called product strategy, some of the terminology and specifics would be very different from what we see in business or company.
I think that just explaining what you mean is more sufficient than just fighting people using the word. If you would like to use it as the product strategy, well, go for it. Just tell me what you mean. Like, what does it look like? And is it just a product concept, or it's a development plan, or what it is? Because the biggest risk of using the word strategy is the high level of ambiguity. Like, you basically don't know what people mean when they say that's our market expansion strategy.
Exactly. Well, I was, as you started speaking about that, I was smiling inside and out because I often feel like this is kind of a problem that gets in the way of effective, like moving forward and collaboration. You don't necessarily need to argue about the definitions so much. Like, is it strategy? Is it not strategy? Like, tell me what it is. I may call it strategy. You call it roadmap. As long as we are talking about that thing, not what we call it, we should be fine. Like, let's go into specifics and into details and yeah, always be wary when you throw in some ambiguous and how do we call it, like buzzwordy terms like strategy, priority, as we discussed recently, into conversation. Just make sure that everyone is on the same page and it's better. It may be better to just replace that with the actual thing that we are talking about. One other thing that rubs me the wrong way in terms of strategy or talking about strategies is, I already alluded to, when we talk about strategy for an entity for which I think it is by and large is impossible to have a strategy because they lack ability to actually execute and follow through on a pattern of choices that they make, that there is an external force that can stop that pattern at any point in time and they would not be able to do anything about that. I vividly, it happens to me a lot. I vividly remember either reading or hearing in conversations about strategy that strategy is something that you can execute yourself. I tried multiple times to find where I read it, where I might have heard it. I was not successful, but I believe that to be true. Like if you have a strategy for something, you should be able to execute it. You should not wait for something to come in and do something for you. At that point, it stops being a strategy. And in this context, I think like something like a team in an organization probably cannot have a strategy because they can be easily overruled. Not say overruled, but they have to stay in line with overall direction for the organization. And if our organization change where it's going, then team strategy doesn't matter much. Whereas in, let's say, business strategy, and if a company has a strategy, well, it can stick to that strategy as long as it's feasible or possible for them. There are also kind of constraints, limits to that. But I think in case of team, it's much easier for strategy to be derailed by external forces.
I like the example and I agree with the overall concept. I kind of doubt the phrasing about just doing something yourself, like by yourself, because I can totally see how you could build a strategy which means that you will increase the capacity or attract the resources to execute it at a certain stage. And you can still plan and start executing something that is not realistic to do just by yourself. In case you would like to make, I don't know, the first 3 steps, then show this success to investors, stakeholders, partners, someone else, and get more people on board and keep scaling up. Well, that's also kind of a strategy.
Yes, well, absolutely. I think maybe I should do something like maybe my vocabulary is lacking or something along those lines. Here, I'm totally with you. It's just I didn't do a very good job of putting that in words. By yourself, I mean that more like you are in a driver's seat, you are not at the mercy of something external happening. And that definitely could involve like building partnerships, collaborating with something to achieve more, or kind of seeking or creating partners, clients, whatever it might be. What I'm trying to say is that you need to be largely in control and kind of driving this thing forward. If at some point you say that I'm not driving anymore, wait for something to happen or to occur, no, at that point I'll start having.
Yep, that makes sense.
We also wanted to have a segment, or however we call it, where we look at an example or a thought experiment. And judging by our conversation right before we hit the record button, I got a sense that you might have a thought experiment for us. But if not, I do have an example for kind of some strategic considerations.
Yeah, well, let's give it a try. Let's say we have a company that has been on the market with the same product for a little while. And this product has been growing, or there are multiple things that have been occurring, extra functions, extra teams. The thing became huge. And at a certain level, it's getting quite hard to manage because like there are multiple directions, there are multiple features. Every team has their own like priority or vision or something. And it's getting more and more difficult because basically you create an ecosystem with multiple products within the system, and the system is kind of losing the track or losing the direction. Do you think it's actually possible for these organization or team or product to build a coherent strategy and make, I don't know, a scale up 100x when there are so many subjects and teams and entities that have their own, like, agenda, because it's easier for small teams. Yeah, you basically get all the 10 most influential people into the room, you lock them and they agree, and then they leave the room and they have some kind of common plan, hopefully, if things went right. But when it's a bigger thing, like how would you theoretically approach the process of putting together this set of choices? And I think the most painfully is cutting the unnecessary stuff and choosing what you're not going to do in the future to achieve long-term success.
That's such a complicated set of questions, I would say. I think first, I think that in every situation it is possible to develop a strategy. Well, if we are talking about like a company or a business which is a unit with relatively high autonomy and agency, so it's able to execute on it. So it is possible to put together a strategy or multi-stage plan towards something bigger. So the answer to that question would be yes. But then how going about building that plan and executing it, I think it may depend quite a lot on the actual specifics. And before you mentioned that, like there might be a difficult choice of cutting something and deciding what not to do, I was going to say, it sounds like a situation in which thinking about how to focus, like strategically focus company, could be an appropriate thing to do. But I guess circling back to what you said, it would be helpful to understand what it is that the company would want to achieve. And it can be those can be different things. Sometimes it can be survival of the company. Like we can circle back to Apple in mid-90s before Steve Jobs, or right when Steve Jobs returned, the company was on the brink of bankruptcy and extinction. And the first thing that Jobs did is that, no, we cut a lot of stuff and we focus on 1 to 3 key products. That was a kind of strategic move by Jobs, but that was towards the objective of keeping the company afloat, cutting costs and hopefully redirecting the resources toward things that can yield some interesting results. Also, there can be other considerations as well. You might see that maybe market is moving in a particular direction, or a particular set of customers has potential grow, whatever. I'm maybe struggling a little bit to come up with an example, but maybe there's a particular part of business that seems particularly promising. And we may say, all right, out of all this huge portfolio of what we have now, let's go into smaller, more focused setup and go with. So I'd say it's possible.
I guess I would add just one thing here, that sometimes we kind of require a model that can illustrate most of the entities, because people quite often they get focused on like what they actually do on their product, on their niche, and they lose the perspective. So firstly, it's the model of the company or the business that is illustrative, where people can see that they are a function, not the thing itself. Because when they're asked about success, they think about the success of their function, but not of the entire system. Maybe the system doesn't need their function anymore, and that's okay. And the secondly is building the meta model, like where this system is, like what's the market, what are the competitors, what's happening overall, and then trying to picture it in the future, like how it's going to grow, expand, or maybe actually get smaller and more efficient. And that would be the way to succeed in the future, comparing to the bigger and clumsier competitors. You didn't know, but having the answer of the future trajectory for the entire organization is probably one of the answers. And I think this is where many people fail, because they actually follow the definition that we started with, when they think it's just a long-term plan for every entity, for every function, for every feature. Everybody writes a 5-year plan forward, and that's not a strategy.
I totally agree with you. And I think like to me, probably circling back to those like five things, and in this conversation, I will definitely start reordering things, like putting the definition of the objective or goal first, and then definitely second thing would be having the model of or understanding of what's going on top of which we layer those things. And by and large, the actual plan and other things are derived from the goal that we want to achieve and our understanding about landscape, for the lack of a better word, around that thing, and how, and then from there we derive how to navigate towards the goal in the best possible way. And here I also have a good, maybe slightly, I don't know, like what's the word? An example, let's say, of focusing, and that is the turnaround that Satya Nadella did when he became Microsoft CEO, where like previously under Ballmer, company operated with Windows, the operating system, being at the core of everything. So like they used and seen the Windows as a leverage to probe other parts of the business and stuff like that. And then when he came in, he kind of turned that around and said like, no, the world has changed. It's no longer a leverage. Let's release Microsoft Office for iPad and stuff like that, which they were holding back because of that strategic.
That is fair. So do you think we could try summarizing this into some takeaways? Maybe 1, 2, or 3 points that...
Yeah, maybe like one thing would be like, first, when you see something that's like strategy, ask yourself what's strategy about this. And then one more would be to think about the goal and objective that you have, and what's the model, what's your understanding or deeper thinking about what can allow you to get to that goal.
In my case, it's a single point saying that I became way more tolerant to people using the word strategy after looking through your 5 criteria, because I realized that yes, like they actually can be attributed to multiple items that people name strategies that I don't. And even in the discussion, I just feel that I can tolerate using strategy in multiple contexts now.
Good stuff. So good weeks until next time.
I would suggest to end our conversation with a quote. It's a Chinese proverb that says, vision without action is a daydream, and action without vision is a nightmare.
That's so apt. Let's end on that.